In this video, I want to take a look at something newer in Octopus Deploy that's all about what happens when things go wrong, when your deployment fails. This episode is focused on the recovery agent. Look, we all know sometimes deployments fail. Anyone who's been doing this for a while knows that it's not just a matter of if, it's more a matter of when. And when a deployment fails, the real cost usually isn't in the failure itself. It's in the time it takes to figure out what happened and also what to do next. That's exactly the problem that the recovery agent is designed to tackle. The recovery agent is part of our AI capabilities. Its job is to help you recover from failed deployments faster by doing the analysis work that it usually takes humans the longest. So when a deployment fails, instead of immediately diving into logs and scrolling through all the output and trying to correlate errors and what happened across steps and environments, you can now invoke the recovery agent directly from inside of Octopus. To make this concrete, let's take a look at an example. So in this example here, you can see I've got the dashboard. This is for the samples instance. And here you can see my dashboard looks pretty green, but you'll notice down here in the bottom, I've got a deployment that actually failed. So in this instance, I'm attempting to deploy, obviously, to an IaaS instance, and it failed for some weird reason. Now you'll notice in here, I have this section which only shows when there's a deployment failure called the recovery agent. So what I can do now is I can use the new recovery agent to assist in recovering from a failed task. Now, when I execute this, it will give me a list of reasons as to why this failed. So here I can see I've got a manual approval step, which was not completed. And so in this instance here, a user didn't come along and approve the deployment. But as you can see, this is one of the ways in which you can gain insight into how a deployment or why a deployment could fail. Let's take a look at another example. I'm going to jump over here to another space. You can see these are all the spaces, by the way, that we have available inside of our samples instance. I love the samples instance because it allows you to basically dive deep into Octopus and see all the parts and pieces. This is the Kubernetes instance that we have up on samples.octopus.app, and you can see I've got a failed deployment. I've actually got a couple here. Let's take a look at this one and see why it failed. This one's utilizing Customize and a service called the Audit Service. Let's take a look at what it suggests as the fix for this. So you can see here that it was actually a failure due to the fact that it could not lease a worker from the worker pool called AWS Worker Pool TF. And so it failed to obviously grab a worker to do work. And so the fix is to verify the health or the state of your workers before conducting a deployment. And so there's a bunch of tips here. You can restart or reprovision any unhealthy workers, etc. But this and other sorts of information turns out to be really, really nice because it gives you insight as to why a failure occurred. So that's the recovery agent at its core. It's offering you suggestions. Now, if you don't like the suggestion, you can certainly ask the recovery agent to give you another suggestion. We'll obviously evaluate the same series of steps and then give you a possible different answer as to why it failed. But in this instance here, you can see that we failed to lease a worker. So it's the same reasons as to why. So after a brief moment, the recovery agent comes back with its assessment. It highlights what it believes is most likely the root cause of the failure, and then it suggests specific recovery steps that you should take in order to resolve it. This might be things like checking a configuration value, correcting an environment-specific setting, or rerunning a deployment after addressing a known issue. So in this instance here, leasing a worker. The important thing here is that this isn't a generic answer. It's based on the deployment itself and in the instance with its configuration. That gives me a much better starting point than starting with raw log files and trying to interpret what they are under a lot of time pressure. So right now, the recovery agent is analysis first. It doesn't make any changes on your behalf. It just tells you what it thinks went wrong and what actions you might be able to take to fix it. And so you stay fully in control of what happens next. Over time, the plan is for us to evolve this facility so that you can also execute approved remediation steps on your behalf. But today, the focus is on accelerating diagnosis and decision-making. So if you're using Octopus Cloud, the recovery agent is already available to you. There's no special setup or configuration required. So when a deployment fails, as it did here, you'll see the option for you to use it. Now, one of the things that people understandably ask about AI features is security and data handling. The recovery agent uses pre-trained AI models hosted in Azure. Your deployment data isn't used to train those models. Prompts aren't retained long-term, and secrets and sensitive values aren't exposed. So data is processed within the appropriate regional boundaries, and that also includes EU processing for EU hosted instances. Now, obviously, it needs to be said, this really shines in situation where you're under a lot of pressure. So if a server goes down or, you're under a time crunch, that's really where the recovery agent shines. Deployment production that fails needs answers quickly. Instead of starting from scratch, a recovery agent gives you an informed starting point almost immediately. So it's really, really useful for those intermittent or hard to reproduce failures. And it's a big help for newer team members who don't yet know the deep historical context of your deployments. The bigger picture here is that by reducing the mean time to recovery, MTTR, failures can still happen, but spending less time diagnosing them and more time fixing them is a meaningful improvement, I think, for any delivery pipeline. So if you're already on Octopus, the next time a deployment fails, unfortunately, try the recovery agent and let us know what you think. See how it works within the context of resolving issues in your workflow. This is one of the ways we're exploring how AI can take on the repetitive, sort of time-consuming tasks that are always part of DevOps, keeping you firmly in control in the decisions that matter.